Dr. Victor Hale had always been driven by a relentless curiosity. A renowned physicist, his life's work revolved around the manipulation of time, a concept that had captivated humanity for centuries. His team, consisting of 4 brilliant minds, had been working in a secret underground laboratory funded by a shadowy government agency. Their latest project, codenamed Kronos, was an experimental device designed to manipulate time at a quantum level. It was meant to be a groundbreaking invention, one that could potentially revolutionize the understanding of the universe. But it was about to become something far more sinister. The lab was a sterile, windowless complex deep beneath the Earth's surface, where the only sounds were the hum of machinery and the occasional murmur of voices. Victor had been awake for nearly 36 hours, his eyes bloodshot and his hands trembling with a mix of exhaustion and excitement. His team, Dr. Rachel Morgan, a brilliant mathematician, Dr. Alan Park, a computer scientist with a specialty in AI, and Dr. Sylvia Ramos, a biochemist with a knack for problem-solving, shared his anticipation. "Are we ready?" Victor asked, his voice rough from lack of sleep. Rachel nodded, her fingers hovering over the controls. "All systems are green. We're ready to initiate the first test." "Remember, we're only going to activate it for a few seconds," Alan added, his fingers dancing over the keyboard. "We don't want to take any unnecessary risks." Sylvia, who had been studying the energy readings, looked up. "Everything is stable. Let's do this." Victor took a deep breath and gave the order. "Activate Kronos." Rachel pressed the button, and the machine roared to life. The air around them seemed to hum with energy as the device's core began to glow with an otherworldly light. The team watched in awe as the readings spiked, the machine bending time in ways they had only theorized about. But then, something went wrong. The lights flickered, and the hum of the machine turned into a high-pitched whine. Alarms blared as the temperature in the room skyrocketed. Victor shouted for Rachel to shut it down, but before she could react, a blinding flash of light enveloped the room. Everything went dark. When Victor opened his eyes, he was back in his office. Clock on the wall read 6:45 p.m., the exact time they had begun the experiment. His heart raced as he realized something was terribly wrong. He had vivid memories of the explosion, of the panic in the room, and yet here he was, back before it had happened. He rushed out of his office and found the others, each of them looking just as bewildered as he was. "Did anyone else," Rachel began, her voice shaking, "experience it?" Sylvia finished. "Yes, I remember everything." Alan looked pale, his eyes darting around the room. "This can't be happening. We all remember the explosion, but we're here, alive." Victor tried to stay calm, piecing together what had happened. The Kronos device. It must have created some kind of temporal loop. We died, but the loop reset us back to the start. "But why?" Rachel asked, her fear evident. "Why would it do that?" Victor shook his head. "I don't know. But we need to figure out how to stop it. We can't let the experiment run again." As they debated their next move, the lights flickered ominously. The hum of the machine, now inactive, seemed to resonate in their bones, as if the device was still exerting its influence. They decided to stay in the control room, away from the device, and monitor the situation. But as the minutes ticked by, an overwhelming sense of dread filled the air. They had survived the first loop, but something about the lab felt wrong. It was as if the walls themselves were watching, waiting. Then, at exactly 8 p.m., the first death occurred. Alan was sitting at his computer, trying to analyze the data from the failed experiment, when the power surged again. The lights flickered, and the temperature spiked. Suddenly, Alan clutched his chest, gasping for air. His eyes widened in terror as his body convulsed, and he collapsed to the floor, dead. The others rushed to his side, but it was too late. Alan was gone, his face frozen in an expression of pure horror. "We have to get out of here," Sylvia screamed, backing away from Alan's body. But as they moved toward the door, the world around them blurred, and they were pulled back into the loop. The next thing they knew, they were all back in their offices at 6:45 p.m., the memory of Alan's death fresh in their minds. Alan, maybe the loop brought him back again, Rachel suggested excitedly. They all rushed to the control room, but as they got close to the lab Alan had been in, they could see the silhouette of Alan's lifeless body through the frosted glass door. "We're trapped," Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. "The loop is killing us." Victor's mind raced. If the loop was resetting every few hours, and if they were destined to die each time, some of them permanently, they needed to understand why it was happening and how to stop it. But with each reset, they were losing precious time and possibly their sanity. "We need to stay focused," Victor said, his voice firm. "The machine is causing this. We need to find a way to shut it down permanently." They gathered in the control room again, avoiding the lab where Alan had died. They discussed possible theories. Was it the machine, or was something else influencing the loop? Could they break free by destroying the device? Or was there another way? As they debated, Victor noticed something strange. The control room, which had always been a sterile environment. Now, it had dark stains on one corner of the wall, stains that hadn't been there before. They seemed to pulse, almost like veins. "What the hell is that?" Rachel asked, pointing to the spreading darkness. Victor reached out to touch the wall, but as his fingers brushed the stain, a searing pain shot through his hand. He recoiled, clutching his palm, which now bore a dark web-like pattern. "It's spreading," Sylvia said, her voice full of dread. Suddenly, Victor rushed to the lab where Alan had died and swung open the door. Alan's body lay covered in the same black, pulsating veins that now adorned the walls. The realization hit them all at once. Kronos' device had created the loop not just as a side effect of the experiment, but as a way to sustain itself. It was using the loop to generate and feed off of them, growing stronger with each reset. "We're not just trapped," Victor said, his voice hollow. "We're being hunted." They tried everything to escape disabling the machine, barricading themselves in different rooms, even attempting to destroy the core, but each time, the loop reset them. And each time they tried to harm the machine, one of them died in increasingly horrifying ways. Sylvia was electrocuted by a malfunctioning control panel. Rachel suffocated as the air in her office inexplicably vanished, and Victor was crushed by the walls of the lab, which seemed to close in on him. Only, unlike with Alan, they all came back with the next new loop. Each time they died, the pain was real and the terror stayed with them, even after the reset. Their bodies bore the marks of their death's burns, cuts, bruises that carried over into the next loop. As the loops continued, their minds began to fray. The memories of their deaths blurred together, and the line between life and death became indistinguishable. The once brilliant scientists were now trapped in a waking nightmare, with no escape in sight. In the final loop, however, Victor found himself alone. His team had all died, and this time they didn't come back. Now it was just him and the machine. The lab was a twisted version of itself, walls stained with blood, the air thick with a suffocating presence. Kronos' device stood at the center, its core pulsing like a beating heart. Victor knew that he was at the end of his rope. He had one last chance to end the nightmare. With trembling hands, he approached the device, tools in hand. He had to destroy it, even if it meant destroying himself in the process. As he worked, the walls began to close in, and the temperature dropped to freezing levels. The machine fought back, lashing out with waves of energy that sent Victor sprawling to the floor. But he pushed through the pain, tearing apart the core piece by piece. Just as the device began to overload, Victor saw them, Alan, Sylvia, Rachel, standing at the edge of his vision, their faces twisted with fear and pain. They were all watching him, their eyes pleading for release. With a final, desperate effort, Victor ripped out the heart of the machine. The room exploded in light, and Victor felt himself being pulled apart, his body disintegrating into nothingness. Then there was silence. Victor awoke in darkness, his body numb and weightless. For a moment, he thought he was dead, truly dead this time. But then he heard it, a soft, rhythmic ticking, like the sound of a clock. He opened his eyes and found himself in the control room, the clock on the wall reading 6:45 p.m. But this time, something was different. The machine was gone, and the lab was silent. Had he finally broken the loop? Was it over? Victor stood up, his body aching, and walked to the door. As he reached for the handle, he hesitated. The door felt cold, like ice, and his breath came out in misty puffs. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The lights flickered, and the walls pulsed with dark veins. People walked by carrying out their usual tasks and duties, as if nothing was out of place, but they were covered in the dark veins as well, their eyes black and hollow. Victor could even spot his 3 colleagues across the room, talking and smiling. The same veiny bodies and hollow eyes as all the others. The air was thick with a sense of dread, and Victor knew he hadn't escaped. The loop was gone, but something far worse had taken its place. The Kronos device had consumed them all, trapping them in a twisted version of reality, where time no longer held any meaning.